So earlier today I made a cabbage salad to take to a picnic, left with half a cabbage left over. So I'm going to make a really simple sauerkraut. First up, I'm going to weigh the half a cabbage. I have 900 grams of cabbage here, and we're going to do a 2% salt ratio, or so 2% of the weight of the cabbage we're going to add as salt. So 900 grams, 2% of 900 grams is 18 grams of salt. And I'm just using pickling salt. So I'm going to weigh that out first, because I'll forget 18. So this is just coarse pickling salt. You don't need to use any sort of special salt. You do want to make sure that you use non-iodized salt. You don't want the iodine in it. You also want to avoid salts that have anti-caking or so on and so on and so on and so forth. It should just say salt on the box. And I weigh it out for accuracy. Really, a lot of, all of the different salt manufacturers have different grain sizes. So if I was to say to you, put in a tablespoon of salt, and you were using a different brand of salt than I was using, you would have a different amount of salt. Weighing it, you get consistent results every time, and you can really nail your recipe. So I cut out the core. I don't always do that, but when I do, I usually end up munching on that in a little bit. Then you just want to slice your cabbage. Thick or thin, doesn't matter. I don't really care. I'm not eating it. You cut it however you want it. Of course, you could use a mandoline. I find for this amount of cabbage, though, it would take me longer to clean the mandoline than it would to chop it with a knife. So I've got this measuring cup, and just stick it in there. And while I cut the other quarter, I'm just going to put some of the salt in here just to get the whole process started. As you can see, I've saved 2 cabbage leaves. We're going to use those a little bit later in the recipe. And they make me giggle because I think of John Candy from Second City wearing a cabbage leaf on the back of his head. Probably only funny to me. So, got the cabbage in here, and what you want to do is you want to break the cabbage down with the salt. You want to break the cell walls, allow the moisture in the cabbage to come out, and the salt will help pull out that moisture. I can already feel it. And I'm going to start with the first quarter just to get it going, and then I'll slowly add the rest of the cabbage and the rest of the salt. So as you can see, as you continue to massage it and break down the cabbage, it creates its own brine. And I think we're in a pretty good space. So the next thing is, what are you going to ferment this in? And you could do it in a mason jar, you could do it in a crock, you could do it, I don't know, you could probably just do it right in this measuring cup. I think a crock is definitely too big for this amount of cabbage. There's not much here. And I don't really want to put it in a mason jar because I kind of like a straight-sided vessel. So I'm just going to use this beaker. We've got these here. We use them for a whole bunch of different things around the kitchen. So in goes the cabbage. And now you just want to push that down. And hopefully there's enough brine to cover the cabbage. And look, there is. So I'm just using my hand. There are a lot of people out there that are trying to sell you something to tamp this down. I mean, if you really wanted to tamp it down, look at that. I've got a cocktail muddler. A cocktail muddler would do exactly the same thing. So, remember the mantra of lacto fermenting. If it's under the brine, it'll be just fine. So our next step is to try and keep it under the brine. And that's where these 2 cabbage leaves come in. So you want to cut it somehow that it fits into the vessel, and we'll push down the cabbage. So there's one, and Yeah. Fermenting is an art and craft. So there you go. That's the initial follower. Those will be below the brine. And then I also, just because, I've got this food safe lid, top of some sort of food container. I've drilled a bunch of holes in it, but you don't have to do that. And just put that in. It fits nicely inside. And then I've got a mason jar just filled with salty water, just to hold the whole thing down. Now, the cabbage will be beneath the brine. I'll probably just throw a tea towel over this and I'll let it go for maybe 4 or 5 days and then we'll give it a taste. So after 4 or 5 days, the sauerkraut reached the point that I like it for flavor, and I didn't have time to get back to do any filming, so I stuck it in the fridge, which essentially shuts the whole process down. And speaking of process, there's probably a lot of people out there asking, how is this safe? How is it safe that you left cabbage on the counter for a week and it's fine? Here's what happened. When we first added the salt sort of broke down the cabbage and drew out a lot of liquid, and that liquid essentially created a brine. That salty brine is something that the bad organisms that we don't want can't live in, or they find it very difficult to live in. But the lactobacillus that we're looking for do like that salty environment. They start to thrive, and as they thrive and grow and multiply, one of the things that they leave behind is lactic acid. That very quickly lowers the pH, and that low pH or high acid environment means that the bad organisms, the ones that we definitely don't want, they cannot survive. They can't live in that. And so remember this, as long as the cabbage is below the brine, everything's fine. If you're using an open vessel like this, you might get a little bit of mold growing on top like we have, but the cabbage is fine. It's under the brine. And yes, I hear you. You're out there, you're tippity-tapping on your keyboard saying, that's not sauerkraut. Sauerkraut needs this and this and this and this and this and this. That's not the way my grandmother makes it. I hear you. This is just a simple introduction to how easy the process is. From here, you can add all kinds of different flavorings. You could add different vegetables, spices, make it what you want. And in the coming months, we're going to give a whole bunch of those a try, and we'll show you which ones we like, which ones we don't, because I'm sure we'll come across a few, and you can pick and choose at that point which ones you want to make. This is a pretty good starting point though. So I'm not ready to eat this yet. I can pop it back in the fridge and it will keep in the fridge, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, 6 months, probably longer. We're gonna eat this on Friday and have it with some sausages. I hope you come back and see that. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.